doesn't last all morning. A cloudburst doesn't last all day. See, my love is up and has left me with no warning. It's not always gonna be this great. All things must pass. All things must pass away.
One thing I thought might be interesting for people doing a Zen retreat that I put in this chapter is something that I discovered looking into the Advaita Vedanta philosophy, which is a kind of Hindu philosophy. It's not Buddhism. And this was not invented by Nisargadatta Maharaj, but I found it in a book by a guy named Nisargadatta Maharaj. And it's Advaita Vedanta's kind of description of what happens with thought. And sometimes when one is doing Zazen for a long time, you can sort of notice this. I like it because it's a kind of a good way to describe something I noticed while doing Zazen. So I'll just read you what I wrote about it here. This is just my summation of something that I read in another book. In the Advaita Vedanta tradition, there's a name for the stages by which a thought appears, matures, and finally becomes something that you can put words to. The first step is called para, or source consciousness. Most people are completely unaware of thoughts at this stage of development. Next comes pashyanti, or thought emanation. At this stage, the thought begins to take on a form. Most of us aren't aware of this stage of the process either. Then there's the stage called madhyama, in which the thought appears in the mind. This is the first part of the process that an ordinary person notices. That's what I first started to notice in Zazen, and then I eventually, after a few years, started to kind of become vaguely aware of the other bits. The final stage is called Vaikari, which means language explodes out. This is where the thought becomes a set of words. We mistakenly believe that these thoughts are produced by a self. So that's that, which is kind of neat. And then there's more stuff. Here's something else that's kind of neat. This is Dogen talking about mind, which I talked about yesterday, so this might be interesting. Mind as mountains, rivers, and the earth is nothing other than mountains, rivers, and the earth. There are no additional waves or surf, no wind or smoke. Mind as the sun, the moon, and the stars is nothing other than the sun, the moon, and the stars. There is no additional fog or mist. Mind as living and dying, coming and going, is nothing other than living and dying, coming and going. There is no additional delusion or realization. Mind as fences, walls, tiles, and pebbles is nothing other than fences, walls, tiles, and pebbles. There is no additional mud or water. Because the state is like this, mind here and now is Buddha, that's a quote, is untainted, mind here and now is Buddha. That's a quote. All Buddhas are untainted Buddhas. This being so, mind here and now is Buddha, is the Buddhas themselves who establish the will, undergo training, realize Bodhi, and experience nirvana. And one last little quote that I want to share, because I like it, is this. This is a very complicated sentence, and it's just, I'll just give it to you. Mountains, this is Dogen. Mountains, rivers, the earth, and human beings are born together. The Buddhas of the 3 times, past, present, and future, and human beings have always practiced together. Thus, if we look at the mountains, rivers, and earth, while one human being is being born, we do not see this human being now appearing through isolated superimposition upon mountains, rivers, and earth that existed before this human being was born. Very complicated sentence, but I like it. And I'll give you some other sentences that might be easier that I thought kind of say the same thing. This is Kosho Uchiyama, who's a contemporary Zen teacher. He earlier in the 20th century. When I took my first breath, my world was born with me. When I die, my world dies with me. In other words, I wasn't born into a world that was already here before me. I do not live simply as one individual among millions of individuals, and I do not leave everything behind me to live on after me. And another phrase, Dainin Katagiri, another contemporary Zen teacher, also lived in the 20th century. When beings appear, why do you happen to be in the particular... When beings appear, why do you happen to be the particular being that you are now? You don't know exactly why, but you are a being whose life is already supported by the vast network of time and space. When a particular being arises, it is not just one thing that arises. All beings arise simultaneously. One thing can't arise alone because all life is deeply interconnected and nothing has its own independent existence. When you are born, the whole world is born with you. When you die, the whole world dies with you. And one more, this is shorter. This is from Kodo Sawaki, another 20th century Zen teacher. When we are born, our universe is born too. When we die, we take everything of our universe with us. So those are some crazy things that we know for sure can't possibly be true that are said by Zen teachers who must be crazy. So we can forget about them because obviously they are crazy and stupid. Does anyone have any questions?
A human being typically lives about 80 years. How many times are they born and how many times do they die?
Well, let me see. You'd have to do some complicated math because according to Dogen, there are oh God, now I forget the number. Geez, there's a thing called a Kshanta, which is there's some 6,000 something of them in the time it takes to snap a finger, and there's a section in Shobo Genzo in which he calculates how many kshantas there are in a single day. So if you took that number, and it's in Shobo Genzo somewhere, it's in the millions, and then multiplied that by the number of hours and figure it, so that's the number. So a lot, yeah. I mean, the idea is, the Buddhist idea of birth and death is that it's happening continuously, moment by moment. So the universe is born and dies at this furiously fast pace which supposedly only the Buddha was able to perceive. That's the, the standard sort of, I don't know what, orthodox answer to that question. And since I'm not the Buddha, I never perceived it that way. But when I think about formulas like that I've heard from ancient Buddhist sources, I think about the way that there were certain things that, when I first encountered Buddhism, there were certain things that I heard from my teachers or read in Buddhist books that made perfect sense, and that I thought, okay, this is something I want to follow and practice, and this is good. And then there were other things that I was like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. To Tim, to Nishijima Roshi, to Dogen and the ancient teachers too. But there was enough of a balance of things that made sense that I thought, well, this I can follow, this I can rely on. And as far as the in-person teachers who I met, I thought these are people I can trust. So I went along with it. And as the almost 40 years that I've been doing this practice have gone along, as things have progressed, more and more of the stuff that I didn't understand has turned out to be true. So I sort of take it on faith that the other stuff that I don't understand is probably also true. So that stuff that I just told you about the, bazillions of times that you're born and die every moment, I think there's probably something to that. I think there's probably some basis to that, and it's probably not just people talking out their asses, or just making stuff up because they don't know the answer and they're just making stuff up to keep everybody quiet. So that's that.